Ryan Neubauer, and welcome to the Piano Lessons 1, 2, 3 lecture series, Lesson 5. Today we're going to talk about it, and I know you've been waiting, major scales and their purpose. I'd like to start off with the C major scale. You may recognize it on the board behind me. Most of you have seen a C major scale by now, but what exactly does this mean? We can play a scale, but so what? Well, today I want to talk about why a scale is useful and how we can construct it, starting with any note. We have 7 unique scale tones. You see 8, but only 7 of them are unique. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. C is considered a repeated note, not a unique note. Each of these notes has a specific name: tonic, supertonic, mediant, subdominant, dominant, submediant, and the leading tone. And these names sort of tell you how that note functions in the scale. For example, tonic and leading tone. This is considered tonic once again. The leading tone kind of leads into tonic. So why do we give them names? Firstly, it's purpose, and second of all, it's convention. We use this so when we're talking to somebody about music, we can reference a certain note in a scale and they know what we're talking about. Now, these names are not unique to the C major scale, but conversely, all scales. Specifically major scales, when they're constructed in this pattern. Now, what do I mean when they're constructed in this pattern? Well, we spent the last 2 videos talking about intervals, mostly harmonic intervals, but today we're going to talk about melodic intervals, and that is the amount of space between each of these melody notes, the flowing notes. So notice they're not stacked, they're not played at once, they're played one after the next, subsequent motion. So if you look at C and you look at D, and you've watched our previous videos on half steps, you know that there's 2 half steps between C and D. If you go from note D to note E, you know that there's 2 half steps. E to F, you know there's 1 half step. F to G, 2. G to A, 2. A to B, 2. B to C, 1. Why is this useful? Well, if we memorize or get to know this pattern, we can actually construct a major scale from any starting pitch. So I would like to write those in for you. Let me do so now. And I'm going to write them as number of half steps. And I'm just going to assume that you know, you've been watching this video, that this represents number of half steps. 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. So we sort of have now developed this sort of major scale phone number, or formula, if you will. So if you want to remember it by number of half steps, you can remember it as 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. Alternatively, you can think of it as whole steps and half steps. So we'd have whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Now, something we do to simplify these names, while they are quite useful, they are a bit clunky, cumbersome. So we like to simplify this. We can call each of these unique pitches by their scale degree. So I'll write these in above the notes, simply because I'm running out of room down here. But we start with scale degree, and we put this little hat above it. And that just signifies that it's a scale degree, not a finger number or a measure number. Scale degree. It's a convention. If you don't put it there, it's not the end of the world, but people might not know you're talking about scale degree. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and no, I didn't forget my own rule. Scale degrees 1 through 7. And if you didn't know this, this would be once again considered scale degree 1. So I'm going to play for you now a C major scale, and I'm going to play on a string voice because it has better resonance. You can hear it better. And I want you to take note of anything unique you might hear. Now, you hear this note. But the scale doesn't sound complete, right? your ear wants that note to continue up to C. Now that resolution is something we crave, and us music nerds will really get perturbed if we hear a piece of music that ends on this leading tone of a scale and doesn't resolve to 1. Now, why is this? There's a really complex scientific reason for this. It has to do with how sound is made. The pitches on a piano or keyboard are the result of, on piano, a string resonating at a certain frequency measured in hertz. From a keyboard, it's produced by a speaker, but still something vibrating at a certain frequency. This vibration, for example, A4, which is located above C4 and below C5, it's towards the middle of the keyboard. A4 is concert pitch at 440 hertz. That is the frequency of A440. So when we play a C major scale, each of the notes in the scale has their own frequency. And when we set up a scale, we play these frequencies in order. And this order makes our brain sort of want to predict the notes that will come next in the series. Our brain is taking in millions of data points at every second, and it is simply impossible for it to process every single one. So as it turns out, our brain is great at guesstimating and filling in the gaps based on what information it does interpret. So when you set up a musical series, a melody, in this case a scale, your brain expects to hear a certain pitch, it predicts that pitch, it wants to hear it, and when it doesn't, you get that tension and you want it to resolve. It's really very neat. You can look up many articles on this phenomenon, and it's not just in music, it's many things, including vision. Your vision's blurry in all but one very specific point, but it's because we look around that we have a crystal clear image. So we're using this process of filling in the gaps all the time. Enough on that. What I do want to talk about, though, is these tones that want to move somewhere. They have tension, they're unstable, but they want to go somewhere stable. We call this phenomenon tendency tones, all right? And it's really pretty unique. Tendency tones. And there are some pretty basic tendency tones. So on a piece of paper, I'd recommend drawing 8 lines, one for each of the scale degrees where the ones repeat. And we're going to label each one with a scale degree. So we'll call this down here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and once again, 1. So on this little chart, I am going to give a visual representation of what tendency tones happen in a scale. Now I'm going to use 3 different colors. I'm going to use red, yellow, and then green. And the red represents very, very strong tendency tones, ones that are really prevalent and you can really hear the tension. Yellow will be a medium tension, and green will be a very light, if any, tension. So we're going to start with the one we've been talking about, the 7 to 1, the B to C at the end of the scale. It really gets under your skin. There we go. 7 to 1. Now notice I went to the one that's directly 1/2 step above the B. I didn't drop back down to this C. While it does work, it's nowhere near as parsimonious as going to the one right above. So we're going to represent this with an arrow. Whoops, there goes the chalk, as it always does. Another very powerful tendency tone in scales, especially major scales, is the 2 to 1. So that would be C to D to C. Or if I play a descending C major scale, 2 to 1 is also very strong. And finally, and this one isn't quite as strong as 2 to 1 or 7 to 1, but it is considered very, very prevalent. Or if we go descending, Four to 3. In this case, F to E. Now I'm going to swap over to the yellow chalk and show you the ones that are a little less sticky, if you will. They really don't have as much power. 6 to 5. 6 to 5 is also a useful tone, but it's not super powerful. And sometimes we can do 3 to 1. This doesn't happen too often, but sometimes. And now finally, the weakest of all these transitions, we are going to go 5 to 1. And because 5 is sort of equidistant from either one, it can either go to the higher C or the lower C or whatever your tonic is. Now, because 5 is a fairly stable note and this is a weak pattern, this is actually less to do with tendency tone and more to do with root motion, which is something we have not covered yet, but we'll cover in future videos. So if you're interested in what root motion is, we'll talk about it soon. So I'm going to now circle some of these notes, or excuse me, scale degrees that are stable. And I guess we'll stick with green for this. 3 is stable, 1 is stable, and 5 is stable. And I'm going to circle the ones that are not very stable. Actually, there's only one of them. That'd be 6. And then the ones that are very, very unstable. And I guess I should include this one as well. Hopefully this makes sense. 7's unstable and it really wants to push towards 1. 4 is unstable, it really wants to push towards 3. And 2 is unstable, it really wants to push towards 1. 6 is sort of unstable, it would like to go to 5, but it doesn't have to. And 5 is pretty happy where it is, but it would be even happier going to 1, if that's possible. Not super important though, not like 7, 4, or 2. Now, we can look at this another way. We have 2 half scales, and we call those tetrachords. They're 4 notes each, and I will try to highlight those for you. We'll consider that. All right. So I want you to notice this. This is the C major tetrachord. This is the G dominant tetrachord. So we actually have a tonic tetrachord, tonic, and dominant. And the reason being, this tetrachord starts on tonic, which is C. This one starts on G, which is considered the dominant. Now these tetrachords are split in half by a whole step. And that's the first 2 out of our final sequence of 2, 2, 2, 1. That's this. And if you look at this, we actually have a pattern of 2, 2, 2, 1. Excuse me. Only 2 2s. Too many 2s for me. And we have this sort of split. And then we go back to a pattern of 2, 2, 1. So if we split them into 2 tetrachords, we actually have 2 symmetrical systems which move by the same pattern. And this distance right here, this F to G, right in the middle would be F sharp or G flat, which is an augmented 4th or diminished 5th, or the tritone. And the tritone is the most dissonant harmonic interval there is. And that will be important later on. So remember that. Remember that tritone is extremely dissonant, if not the most dissonant interval. In fact, I think I've heard it referenced as the devil's interval. Well, I have, so we'll leave it at that. I believe that's all I wanted to cover. If you have any questions about major scales, their composition, or tendency tones, please leave it in the comments below. And before I go, I would actually like to give you a practice question. I'm going to start a scale on a random note. Well, maybe not too random. We'll start it here. You thought you were going to have it easy. We'll start on C sharp. So, I would like you now to pause the video and construct the C sharp major scale based on our phone number or whole and half step formula that we crafted. And after you pause it, compare it to what I put up here and see if you got the answer right. If you do, you're well on your way to understanding major scales. Now if you look at this, we have C sharp to D sharp, that is 2 half steps. D sharp to E sharp, which is enharmonically F, that is 2 half steps. E sharp to F sharp, that is 1 half step. F sharp to G sharp, 2. G sharp to A sharp, 2. A sharp to B sharp, 2. And then finally, C sharp, once again, B sharp, which is enharmonically C to C sharp, that is 1 half step. So we have whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. And we have here, first 4 notes are the tonic tetrachord, last 4 notes are the dominant tetrachord. I know this board has gotten a little messy, but if you've been trekking along, then I'm sure you can decipher it. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope to see you in our next lesson.